The antiseptic smell of the hospital corridor still clung to my clothes as I sat in my car in the parking garage, hands trembling as I stared at my phone. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows through my windshield, making everything feel cold and clinical. I had just spent 3 hours with my 84-year-old mother during her cardiology appointment, advocating for her care, asking the right questions, taking detailed notes about her new medication regimen. Yet somehow, according to what I'd just overheard the nurse saying to Dr. Martinez, I was the one preventing her from getting proper treatment. The words echoed in my mind like a broken record. Her daughter has been interfering with the treatment plan. She's been blocking necessary procedures. The family member who called said she's becoming controlling and paranoid about the medical team. Before we dive into this unbelievable tale, please like and subscribe. I read every comment, so tell me where you're from. Because what happened next involves family betrayal at its deepest level, and I need to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Catherine Evans. I'm 58 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a solid relationship with my younger sister. I've been the primary caregiver for our mother ever since Dad passed 2 years ago. Every doctor's appointment, every medication pickup, every emergency room visit, I've been there, clipboard in hand, asking questions that needed to be asked, ensuring Mom gets the care she deserves. My mother has mild dementia, and while she's still sharp most days, medical appointments overwhelm her. She nods and smiles at doctors, but rarely remembers to mention her symptoms or ask about side effects. The November rain drummed against my car roof as I tried to process what I'd heard. Someone had been calling Mom's doctors, painting me as an obstacle to her care. But who would do such a thing? The answer came to me with a sinking feeling in my stomach, and I found myself thinking about my sister Linda. Linda Catherine Morrison, my 55-year-old sister, had always been the golden child. Where I was practical and methodical, she was charming and spontaneous. She lived 40 minutes away in the suburbs with her husband and teenage daughter, working as a real estate agent with flexible hours that should have made it easier for her to help with Mom's care. But Linda had a way of disappearing when things got difficult. She'd show up for birthday dinners and holidays, bringing expensive flowers and regaling everyone with stories of her latest real estate triumphs. But when Mom needed someone to sit in sterile waiting rooms or navigate insurance paperwork, Linda was always mysteriously busy with crucial client meetings. The drive home took me through the tree-lined streets of Riverside Heights, where autumn leaves clung stubbornly to oak branches despite the persistent rain. I pulled into the driveway of the small ranch house I shared with my husband Marcus, grateful to see his truck already parked there. The warm glow from our kitchen window felt like a beacon after the cold, institutional lighting of the medical center. Marcus James Evans, my husband of 32 years, was standing at the stove stirring something that smelled like his famous beef stew. At 60, he still had the steady presence that had attracted me all those years ago, though his dark hair was now more silver than black. He worked as a maintenance supervisor at the local community college, and his practical, problem-solving nature had been my anchor through every family crisis we'd faced. "How did the appointment go?" he asked, not turning around, but somehow sensing my distress from the way I'd closed the door. Marcus had an uncanny ability to read my moods, developed over decades of marriage and refined during the challenging years of caring for my aging parents. "That's what I need to figure out," I said, hanging my damp coat on the hook by the door. The kitchen was warm and welcoming, filled with the scents of home-cooked food and the soft jazz music Marcus always played while cooking. Our golden retriever, Bailey, padded over to greet me, his tail wagging as he sensed I needed comfort. I told Marcus about the conversation I'd overheard, watching his expression grow more serious as I described the nurse's comments about family interference. He listened without interrupting, occasionally stirring the stew. his jaw tightening when I mentioned the accusations about blocking medical procedures. Someone's been feeding them false information, I concluded, sinking into one of our kitchen chairs. And I have a terrible feeling I know who it is. The next morning, I decided to call my friend Patricia to get an outside perspective before confronting anyone in my family. Patricia Helen Caldwell had been my closest friend for over 20 years, ever since our kids were in elementary school together. At 57, she was a retired nurse with silver hair she wore in a practical bob and kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Patricia had worked in hospital administration for most of her career, and she understood both family dynamics and medical politics better than anyone I knew. We met at our usual spot, Corner Cafe on Main Street, a cozy place with worn wooden tables and mismatched chairs that served the best coffee in town. The morning rush had died down, leaving us with relative privacy in a booth near the window. Outside, the November sky was overcast, matching my mood perfectly. Patricia arrived wearing her favorite burgundy cardigan and carrying the leather purse she'd had for at least a decade. She took one look at my face and ordered us both large coffees without asking what I wanted. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, settling into the booth across from me. "What's going on?" I explained the situation, watching Patricia's expression shift from concern to recognition to something that looked like anger. She'd witnessed Linda's pattern of behavior over the years, had listened to me vent about my sister's disappearing acts during family emergencies. "This sounds exactly like something Linda would do," Patricia said, stirring cream into her coffee with more force than necessary. "Remember when your dad was in the hospital with pneumonia? She showed up once for 15 minutes, took a selfie with him for Facebook, then disappeared for the rest of his 2-week stay. But somehow she managed to tell everyone at the funeral reception how devoted she'd been to his care." The cafe buzzed with quiet conversation around us, the normal sounds of a small town morning. But I felt isolated in our booth, grappling with the possibility that my own sister was sabotaging my efforts to care for our mother. That afternoon, I drove to Mom's assisted living facility, Sunset Manor, for our usual Wednesday visit. The facility was well maintained, with cheerful yellow walls and comfortable common areas designed to feel home-like rather than institutional. Mom's apartment was on the second floor, and I always took the elevator with a sense of anticipation mixed with worry. Her good days and bad days were becoming increasingly unpredictable. I found Mom in her favorite armchair, working on a crossword puzzle with intense concentration. At 84, she was still beautiful, with silver hair she insisted on having styled weekly and bright blue eyes that sparkled when she was having a clear moment. Today seemed to be one of her better days. "Catherine, sweetheart," she said, looking up with genuine pleasure. "I was just thinking about you. How did my appointment go yesterday? I'm afraid I don't remember much about it." This was the heartbreaking reality of Mom's condition. She knew something important had happened, but the details had already faded like morning mist. I sat on her small sofa, choosing my words carefully. "It went well, Mom. Dr. Martinez adjusted your heart medication, and we scheduled your next appointment for December." I paused, then decided to probe gently. "Have you talked to Linda lately about your medical care?" Mom's expression grew thoughtful, and I could see her trying to piece together fragmented memories. "Linda called a few days ago. Or was it last week? She seemed worried about something. Said she was concerned about your— what did she call it? Your approach to my doctors." My heart sank, but I kept my voice steady. "What did she say exactly?" "Oh, honey, you know how my memory is these days. Something about you being too controlling, asking too many questions. She said she might need to talk to someone about it." Mom reached for my hand, her touch papery but warm. But I told her you're wonderful. You take such good care of me. I don't know what I'd do without you. The late afternoon sun slanted through Mom's window, casting long shadows across her small living room. I stayed for another hour, helping her organize her medication dispenser and listening to stories I'd heard dozens of times before. But my mind kept circling back to Linda's phone call and the implications of what Mom had remembered. That evening, Marcus and I sat in our living room after dinner, the remains of his beef stew warming us against the November chill. I'd filled him in on my conversation with Mom, and he'd listened with the patient attention that made him such a good partner in navigating family crises. "So Linda's definitely been calling the doctors," he said, his voice carrying the careful control he used when he was truly angry. "The question is, what's her endgame? What does she hope to accomplish by undermining you?" I curled up next to him on our worn leather couch, Bailey settling at our feet with a contented sigh. The living room was our sanctuary, filled with photos of family vacations and shelves lined with books we'd collected over 3 decades of marriage. It felt surreal to be discussing family betrayal in this peaceful space. "I think she wants to look like the concerned daughter without actually doing the work," I said. "If she can convince the medical team that I'm the problem, then when something goes wrong with Mom's care, she'll have already established herself as the voice of reason." Marcus nodded grimly. Classic Linda behavior. Create a crisis, then position herself as the solution. Over the next few days, I found myself analyzing every interaction I'd had with Mom's medical team over the past few months. Had Dr. Martinez seemed more distant during recent visits? Had the nurses been less forthcoming with information? Looking back, I could identify subtle shifts in their behavior that I'd attributed to busy schedules or staff changes. The realization that Linda had been systematically undermining my relationship with Mom's healthcare providers filled me with a cold fury I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or family drama. Mom's health and well-being were at stake, and Linda's manipulations could have serious consequences for the quality of care our mother received. I called Patricia again, needing to talk through my growing anger with someone who understood the full scope of Linda's behavior patterns. We met for coffee again, this time at a quieter place across town, where I felt safe expressing my frustration without worrying about being overheard by neighbors or acquaintances. "I keep thinking about all the times I've covered for her," I told Patricia, stirring my coffee with unnecessary vigor. "All the family events where I made excuses for her absence. All the times I told Mom that Linda was just busy with work. I've been enabling this behavior for years." Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious. "The question now is, what are you going to do about it? You can't let this continue, Catherine. Your mother's health is too important." The coffee shop around us was nearly empty, just a few college students with laptops and an elderly man reading a newspaper. The quiet atmosphere made our conversation feel both intimate and urgent. "I know I need to confront her directly," I said. "But I also need to understand exactly what she's been telling the doctors. If I'm going to fix this mess, I need all the facts." That weekend, Marcus suggested we drive to the lake, where he and I often went to think through difficult decisions. The November air was crisp and clean, and the lake's surface reflected the bare branches of surrounding trees like a mirror. We walked along the familiar path in comfortable silence, our breath visible in small puffs of white. "You know what bothers me most?" I said, finally breaking the silence. "It's not just that Linda lied about me. It's that she's willing to risk Mom's health to make herself look better. That's a level of selfishness I didn't think even she was capable of." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. You've spent your whole adult life trying to see the best in your sister. But sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and you have to believe them. As we walked back to the car, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion were still there, but underneath was a growing determination. I wasn't just going to confront Linda about her lies. I was going to make sure she understood that her actions had real consequences, not just for me, but for our mother. And that's when the pattern snapped into place, because Linda's deception went far deeper than I could have imagined, and the web of lies she'd constructed was about to unravel in ways that would shake our family to its core. The first shocking discovery came when I decided to accompany Mom to her next appointment. I'd called ahead and explained to the receptionist that there had been some miscommunication about the family's involvement in Mom's care, and I wanted to clarify things directly with Dr. Henderson. Mom seemed genuinely pleased when I offered to drive her. "Oh, Catherine, that would be wonderful. I've been feeling so confused about everything lately. Sometimes I think the doctors are telling me one thing, and then Linda explains it completely differently." That comment made my stomach tighten, but I kept my voice light. "Well, maybe having me there will help clear things up." As we sat in the waiting room, Mom fidgeted with her purse strap, a nervous habit she'd developed since Dad died. "I hope Linda won't be upset that you came instead of her," she said quietly. "She's been so insistent about handling all the medical things herself." "Mom, you're allowed to have both your daughters involved in your care?" I said, covering her hand with mine. "In fact, it's probably better that way." When Dr. Henderson called us back, I could see the confusion in his eyes as he looked between Mom and me. He was younger than I'd expected, probably in his early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Morrison, I thought your daughter Linda was coming with you today," he said, settling behind his desk with Mom's chart. "This is my other daughter, Catherine," Mom explained. "She wanted to be involved too." Dr. Henderson's expression shifted subtly, and I caught something that looked almost like relief. "I see. Well, Catherine, I'm glad you're here. I've been concerned about some of the communication issues we've been having." "What kind of communication issues?" I asked, though my heart was already racing. He glanced at Mom, then back at me. "Well, Linda has been very adamant that you've been interfering with your mother's treatment plan. She's told us on several occasions that you've been encouraging your mother to skip appointments and ignore medical advice." Mom turned to stare at me, her eyes wide. "Catherine, you never told me not to go to appointments." "Because I didn't," I said firmly, looking directly at Dr. Henderson. "In fact, I've been encouraging Mom to stay on top of her health care. I had no idea she was missing appointments until recently." Dr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, and I could see him processing this information. "That's very different from what Linda has been telling us. She's also mentioned that you've been questioning the medications we've prescribed and telling your mother they're unnecessary." "I've never said anything about medications being unnecessary," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I don't even know what medications she's on because Linda has kept me completely out of the loop." Mom looked between us, her confusion evident. "But Linda said you thought Dr. Henderson was being too aggressive with my treatment. She said you were worried about side effects." My heart sank as I realized the depth of Linda's manipulation. She hadn't just been lying to the doctors about me. She'd been lying to Mom about me too, creating a web of deception that kept us all separated and confused. "Mom, I never said any of those things," I said gently. "I've been asking Linda for updates about your health, and she's been telling me everything was fine." Dr. Henderson was taking notes now, and when he looked up, his expression was serious. "I think we need to have a family meeting," All of us together. There seems to be a significant breakdown in communication here, and it's affecting your mother's care. That evening, I called Linda. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number, but my resolve was stronger than my nervousness. She answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful and unsuspecting. "Catherine, how are things going? I've been so busy with work. I haven't had a chance to call." "We need to talk," I said, skipping any pleasantries. "I went to Mom's doctor appointment today." The silence on the other end was telling. When Linda finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. "You had no right to interfere with Mom's medical care." "Interfere?" I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. "Linda, I found out what you've been telling Dr. Henderson about me. The lies you've been spreading." "They're not lies," she said, but I could hear the defensiveness creeping in. "You have been questioning everything. Every time I try to handle Mom's care, you second-guess me." "When?" I demanded. "When have I second-guessed you? When have I even had the opportunity? You've kept me completely in the dark about everything." "You're being dramatic, Catherine. You always do this." "Do what? Try to take care of our mother? Try to be involved in important family decisions?" Linda's voice turned cold. "You try to take over everything, just like you did when Dad was sick. You act like you're the only one who cares." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. During Dad's illness, I had been heavily involved in his care, but only because Linda had seemed overwhelmed and asked for help. Now, she was rewriting history, turning my support into some kind of power grab. "That's not what happened, and you know it," I said. "But Linda, this isn't about the past. This is about Mom, and about the fact that you've been lying to her doctors about me." "I haven't been lying. I've been protecting Mom from your need to control everything." "By telling her doctors that I'm preventing her from getting proper care? By making them think I'm sabotaging her treatment?" Another long silence. When Linda spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. "I was trying to help." "Help who? Because you certainly haven't been helping Mom. Do you realize she's been missing appointments? Do you know that Dr. Henderson thinks our family is dysfunctional because of the mixed messages he's been getting?" "I've been handling everything just fine," Linda said, but the fight was going out of her voice. "No, you haven't, and the doctor wants to meet with all of us together to clear this up." "I'm not doing that," Linda said quickly. "I'm not sitting through one of your confrontations." "This isn't a confrontation, Linda. This is about Mom's health. This is about making sure she gets the care she needs without all this confusion and drama." Linda was quiet for so long, I thought she might have hung up. Finally, she said, "Why do you always make me feel like I'm the bad guy, Catherine? I've been doing my best." For the first time in our conversation, I heard something vulnerable in her voice, something that reminded me of the little sister who used to come to me when she was scared or hurt. But I also knew that this pattern, this cycle of manipulation followed by playing the victim, was exactly what had gotten us into this mess. "I don't want you to be the bad guy," I said, softening my tone slightly. "I want us to work together to take care of Mom, but that means being honest with each other and with her doctors." "Fine," Linda said after another pause. "I'll go to the meeting, but don't expect me to apologize for trying to protect our family." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, wondering if I'd made any progress at all, or if I'd just pushed Linda further into her defensive corner. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally seeing the full picture of what had been happening. Linda's lies weren't just about making me look bad. They were about creating a version of reality where she was the devoted daughter and I was the interfering sister. The problem was, her version of reality was putting Mom's health at risk, and I wasn't going to let that continue. What I didn't know was that our confrontation had set something in motion that would force all of us to face truths we'd been avoiding for years, and the family meeting Dr. Henderson had suggested would reveal secrets that went far beyond Linda's lies about my involvement in Mom's care. I spent the next 2 days dreading the appointment with Dr. Henderson, but I also found myself thinking more about that moment when Linda's voice had cracked, when she'd sounded like the little sister I remembered. Part of me wondered if I'd been too hard on her, but then I'd remember Mom sitting confused in her living room, asking why her doctor was upset with her, and my resolve would strengthen. The morning of the appointment, I arrived at Mom's house early to pick her up. She was waiting by the window, dressed in her good blue dress with the pearl buttons, the one she wore to church and important occasions. "You look lovely, Mom," I said, kissing her cheek. "I'm nervous, Catherine. I don't like when doctors want to have meetings. It usually means something's wrong." She fumbled with her purse strap, and I could see her hands shaking slightly. "Nothing's wrong with you, Mom. Dr. Henderson just wants to make sure we're all on the same page about your care. It's actually a good thing." "Will Linda be there?" Mom asked as we walked to my car. "Yes, she'll meet us there." Mom nodded, but I caught her worried expression in my peripheral vision. "You girls aren't fighting, are you? I know Linda's been stressed lately. She calls me almost every day asking about my appointments, checking on whether you've been to see me." I kept my voice carefully neutral. "We just want to make sure you're getting the best care possible." At the medical center, Linda was already in the waiting room when we arrived. She stood when she saw us, smoothing down her black slacks and adjusting her blazer. She looked like she was dressed for a job interview or a court appearance. "Hi, Mom," Linda said, giving our mother a careful hug. "You look nice." "Thank you, dear. So do you. Though you look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" "I'm fine, Mom." Linda's eyes flicked to me over Mom's head, and I saw the same defensive wariness I'd heard in her voice on the phone. Dr. Henderson's office was larger than his examination rooms, with a round table surrounded by 4 chairs. He gestured for us to sit, and I noticed how Linda chose the chair farthest from me, with Mom between us. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Henderson said, settling into his chair with our mother's thick file in front of him. "I thought it would be helpful for us to meet together, because I've been getting some conflicting information about Mrs. Morrison's care, and I want to make sure we're all working toward the same goals." Mom looked around the table uncertainly. "Is something wrong with my treatment, doctor?" "Not at all, Mrs. Morrison. Your health is stable, and we're managing your conditions well. But I've had some concerns about communication." He opened the file and pulled out what looked like handwritten notes. "Linda, you've called my office several times, expressing worry that your sister might be interfering with your mother's medication compliance and appointment attendance." Linda's face flushed pink. "I was just concerned about Mom's well-being." "And Catherine," Dr. Henderson continued. "When I spoke with you, you seemed unaware of these concerns and mentioned that your mother had been missing appointments." I felt Mom's eyes on me. "I wasn't aware that Linda had been calling you," I said carefully. "Wait," Mom interjected, her voice rising slightly. "Linda, you called Dr. Henderson about me? About Catherine?" Linda shifted in her chair. "I was trying to protect you, Mom. I was worried that Catherine might be overwhelming you with too much medical information or pushing you to make decisions you weren't comfortable with." "But Catherine doesn't push me to do anything," Mom said, looking genuinely confused. "She drives me to appointments when you're busy, and she helps me understand what you tell me, Dr. Henderson. She's never interfered with my medicines." Dr. Henderson leaned forward slightly. "Linda, Can you give me specific examples of when you observed Catherine interfering with your mother's care? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Linda's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and I could see her knuckles turning white. I never actually saw her do anything specific, Linda admitted finally. But Mom seemed confused sometimes when we'd talk about her appointments, and I thought maybe Catherine was giving her conflicting information. Mom, I said gently, have I ever told you not to take your medications or not to go to your appointments? No, never. Catherine always encourages me to follow my treatment plan. Mom turned to Linda with a puzzled expression. Why would you think she was interfering? Linda's voice became very small. I don't know. I guess I just felt like I was losing control of the situation, like everyone was making decisions without me. Dr. Henderson set down his pen. Linda, I appreciate your concern for your mother, but making accusations without evidence has created unnecessary confusion and stress for everyone involved, including your mother. I'm sorry, Linda said, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely contrite rather than defensive. I didn't mean to cause problems. I just felt like I wasn't being included in Mom's care decisions. I looked at my sister across the table and saw something I hadn't expected to see. Genuine fear. Not the manipulative self-pity I'd grown accustomed to, but real anxiety about being left out, about losing her role in Mom's life. Linda, I said slowly, I never intended to exclude you. I help Mom when you're not available, but I always assumed you were the primary contact with her doctors. But you know so much more about medical stuff than I do, Linda said, her voice barely above a whisper. And Mom always seems more comfortable talking to you about health things. I felt like I was becoming irrelevant. Mom reached over and took Linda's hand. Oh, sweetheart, you're never irrelevant. You're my daughter. Catherine helps with medical things because she's good at organizing and asking questions, but you help me in so many other ways. Dr. Henderson cleared his throat. I think we're getting to the heart of the matter. Mrs. Morrison, who would you like to be your primary contact for medical decisions and communication? Mom looked between Linda and me with obvious distress. I don't want to choose between my daughters. Can't they both be involved? Of course, Dr. Henderson said. But it would help if we could establish clear roles so there's no confusion going forward. I think Linda should be the primary contact, I said, surprising myself as much as everyone else. She's always been more involved in Mom's day-to-day care. I can be backup for when she's not available. Linda's head snapped up, and she stared at me with wide eyes. Really? Really? But Linda, that means you need to keep me informed about what's happening, and you can't make accusations about me to Mom's doctors without talking to me first. I can do that, Linda said quickly. I promise. Dr. Henderson smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. I think this is a much better arrangement. Mrs. Morrison, are you comfortable with this plan? Yes, if the girls are both happy with it. Mom squeezed Linda's hand and reached for mine with her other hand. I just want my daughters to get along. As we prepared to leave, I thought the crisis was over. We'd cleared the air, established boundaries, and found a way to work together. But as Linda gathered her purse and stood to leave, she turned to Dr. Henderson with a hesitant expression. Doctor, there is one more thing I probably should have mentioned before now. Something about Mom's finances and some decisions that have been made recently. I wasn't sure if it was relevant to her medical care, but now I'm thinking it might be. The relief I'd been feeling evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. Mom's face went pale, and I saw her hands begin to tremble again. Dr. Henderson settled back into his chair, his earlier smile fading as he sensed the shift in the room's atmosphere. The afternoon sunlight streaming through his office window seemed to dim, casting longer shadows across the medical diplomas on his wall. "What kind of financial decisions, Linda?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled despite the anxiety churning in my chest. The leather chair beneath me suddenly felt too warm, too confining. Linda's fingers worried the strap of her purse, her knuckles white against the brown leather. "Well, it's about Mom's house, and some changes to her accounts. I know Catherine has been helping Mom with paperwork lately, and I just thought maybe the doctor should know if there are any big changes happening in Mom's life." Mom's face had gone from pale to ashen, and I watched her shrink back into her chair as if trying to disappear entirely. The tremor in her hands had spread to her voice when she spoke. "Linda, I don't think this is the right place for this conversation. But we just agreed to be more open with each other," Linda said, her tone taking on that familiar edge of righteousness that made my stomach clench. "And Dr. Henderson said it's important for him to understand Mom's whole situation." Dr. Henderson glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. He adjusted his glasses and leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Morrison, if there are significant life changes happening, they can sometimes affect a patient's stress levels and overall health. But you're also right that this might be better discussed privately with your daughters." "The thing is," Linda continued, seemingly unable to stop herself now that she'd started, "I found out that Catherine has been added to Mom's bank accounts, and there was talk about putting the house in Catherine's name. I'm not saying anything's wrong, but it seems like big decisions are being made without the whole family being involved." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and choking. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, a combination of embarrassment and anger that made my hands tremble. Mom looked like she might cry, her eyes darting between Linda and me with the desperate expression of someone caught between two opposing forces. "Linda," I said, fighting to keep my voice level, "this really isn't the appropriate venue for this discussion." "Why not?" Linda's voice rose slightly, and I could see the hurt and frustration she'd been holding back finally breaking through. "We're supposed to be a family. We're supposed to make decisions together. But somehow, I'm always the last to know about everything." Dr. Henderson cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should focus on Mrs. Morrison's immediate medical needs for now. These other matters, while certainly important to your family, might be better addressed in a different setting." But Linda seemed unable to let it go, her words tumbling out faster now, as if a dam had burst. "I just think it's strange that the same person who's been managing all of Mom's medical appointments is also the one taking over her finances. It makes me wonder what else I don't know about." Mom finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Linda, please stop. You're making it sound like Catherine is doing something wrong, and she isn't. She's been helping me because I asked her to help me." "But why didn't you ask me to help too?" Linda's question came out plaintive, almost childlike, and I suddenly saw past her accusations to the deeper hurt underneath. The office fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of phones ringing in the hallway. Dr. Henderson looked distinctly uncomfortable, probably wishing he'd never agreed to this family meeting in the first place. I took a deep breath, trying to choose my words carefully. "Linda, Mom asked me to help with some financial organization because I have experience with that kind of paperwork from my job. It wasn't about excluding you. It was about practicality." "But adding your name to accounts? Transferring property? Those aren't just paperwork tasks, Catherine. Those are major decisions that affect our whole family." Mom's hands were shaking more visibly now, and she pressed them together in her lap, in a futile attempt to still them. I thought I was making things easier for everyone. I didn't want to burden both of you with these complicated decisions. Burden us? Linda's voice cracked. Mom, we're your daughters. It's not a burden to be involved in important decisions about your life. Dr. Henderson stood up, clearly hoping to end the meeting before it deteriorated further. Ladies, I think this has been a very productive conversation about Mrs. Morrison's medical care. Perhaps you could continue your other discussion at home where you'll have more privacy. But as we gathered our things to leave, I could see Linda wasn't finished. She had that determined set to her jaw that I remembered from childhood arguments, the look that meant she was prepared to dig in her heels no matter what. And from the way Mom was avoiding eye contact with both of us, carefully folding and refolding the clinic paperwork in her hands, I had the sinking feeling that Linda's suspicions about the financial arrangements were just the tip of the iceberg. The car ride home was suffocating. Mom sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, while Linda followed behind us in her own car, probably planning her next move. I kept glancing at Mom, waiting for her to break the silence, but she seemed lost in her own thoughts. When we pulled into the driveway, Linda was already out of her car and walking toward us with purpose. I helped Mom out slowly, her movements more careful than usual after the stress of the appointment. Mom, I think we need to finish our conversation, Linda said before we even reached the front door. Can't this wait until tomorrow? I asked, fishing for Mom's house key. She's exhausted. No, Catherine, it can't wait. I've been patient, but I need to understand what's really going on with Mom's affairs. Mom unlocked the door herself and walked straight to her favorite chair in the living room, settling into it with a heavy sigh. Linda and I followed, maintaining the careful distance we'd kept since the doctor's office. Linda, Mom said quietly, what exactly do you want to know? Everything. I want to know about the bank accounts, about the house, about why Catherine seems to know more about your situation than I do. I sat down across from them, trying to keep my voice level. Mom asked me to help because she was feeling overwhelmed by all the paperwork after Dad died. It started small, just organizing bills and insurance claims. But it didn't stay small, did it? Linda's tone was accusatory. Because now your name is on Mom's checking account, and somehow the house deed has been changed. Mom's face went pale, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Catherine, you didn't tell Linda about the deed change? My stomach dropped. Mom, you asked me not to discuss it with anyone until you were ready. What deed change? Linda's voice rose an octave. Mom, what did you do? The silence stretched between us until Mom finally spoke, her voice barely audible. I added Catherine's name to the house deed, as a joint owner. Linda stared at us both, her mouth slightly open. When did this happen? 3 months ago, Mom whispered. 3 months! Linda stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. 3 months? And nobody thought to tell me? I'm your daughter too, Mom. I was going to tell you, Mom said, her hands trembling again. I just didn't know how to bring it up without it sounding like I was playing favorites. Well, congratulations, because that's exactly how it sounds. Linda turned back to face us. Catherine gets added to your bank account. Catherine gets put on the house deed. Catherine manages all your medical appointments. What's left for me, Mom? What part of your life am I still allowed to participate in? The hurt in Linda's voice cut through my own defensiveness. I realized I'd been so focused on helping Mom manage her practical needs that I hadn't considered how it must look from the outside. Linda, I never asked for any of this, I said. Mom needed help, and I was available to provide it. Available how? Because you live closer? Because you work in accounting? Or because you saw an opportunity? That's enough, Mom said with more force than I'd heard from her all day. Linda, you're being unfair to your sister. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Catherine has positioned herself to inherit everything, while I've been kept in the dark about major decisions. Mom struggled to her feet, moving to stand between Linda and me. Nobody is positioning themselves for anything. I made these decisions because I was scared about what would happen if something happened to me suddenly. Catherine lives 20 minutes away, Linda. You live in another state. So that disqualifies me from being involved in important family decisions? No, but it makes the practical day-to-day management more complicated. Linda ran her hands through her hair, looking more frustrated than angry now. Mom, I would have found a way to help if you'd asked me to. I would have made it work. I know you would have tried, sweetheart. But Catherine was here, and she offered, and I was drowning in paperwork and appointments and decisions I didn't want to make alone. I watched the exchange between them, beginning to understand that this wasn't really about money or property. This was about Linda feeling pushed out of Mom's life at a time when Mom needed more support than ever. Linda, I said carefully, what if we figured out a way for you to be more involved going forward? She looked at me skeptically. Like what? Like, what if you took over coordinating some of Mom's care? Maybe the physical therapy appointments? Or managing her medications? I live 8 hours away, Catherine. But you could call to check on things. You could be the one Mom talks to about how she's feeling, about what she's worried about. I've been so focused on the logistics that maybe I've missed some of the emotional support she needs. Mom looked between us hopefully. I would like that. I miss talking to you regularly, Linda. But what about the financial arrangements that are already in place? Linda asked. What about the deed change? Mom was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe we need to talk to someone about how to make this more fair. Or maybe, I said slowly, we need to have a bigger conversation about what you really want, Mom. Not just what's most convenient, but what feels right for our family. Linda sat back down, looking exhausted. I just don't want to be shut out. I know I can't be here every day, but I want to matter in Mom's life. You do matter, Mom said firmly. You've always mattered. I just got overwhelmed and let Catherine handle too much because it seemed easier at the time. I could see we were approaching something important, but before anyone could say more, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. I felt my stomach clench as I recognized the implications of an unexpected visitor during what was already such a delicate conversation. Are you expecting someone, Mom? I asked, though I could see from her confused expression that she wasn't. No, I don't think so. She started to get up, but I gestured for her to stay seated. I'll get it. As I walked toward the front door, my mind raced through possibilities. Had Linda called someone before coming here? Had one of Mom's neighbors seen the unfamiliar car and decided to check on things? The timing felt ominous, just when we were finally making progress. I opened the door to find Dr. Martinez, Mom's primary care physician, standing on the porch with a concerned expression. My heart sank immediately. Catherine, I'm sorry to show up unannounced like this, but I've been trying to reach your mother all week about some test results, and when I couldn't get through, I got worried. Test results? I felt completely blindsided. What test results? The blood work we did last Tuesday. I left several messages. Dr. Martinez looked past me toward the living room. Is your mother home? I stood there for a moment, processing. Mom had gone for routine blood work last Tuesday, I knew that. But I hadn't heard anything about results, and apparently neither had she. Mom, I called back toward the living room. Doctor Martinez is here about some test results. I heard chairs scraping and footsteps, and then Mom appeared in the hallway with Linda right behind her. Dr. Martinez? I'm so sorry, I haven't been checking my messages very well lately. Is everything all right? May I come in? I'd prefer to discuss this sitting down. The four of us ended up back in the living room, but the atmosphere had completely shifted. The careful progress Linda and I had been making suddenly felt fragile and secondary. Dr. Martinez settled into the chair Linda had vacated, and Linda perched on the arm of Mom's chair. The blood work shows some irregularities in your kidney function, Mrs. Chen. Dr. Martinez began gently. Nothing immediately dangerous, but it's something we need to monitor closely and possibly adjust some of your current medications. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Kidney function? But she's been feeling fine. Often, these changes happen gradually, and people don't notice symptoms until things are more advanced. The good news is, we caught it early. Dr. Martinez turned back to Mom. But I need to ask, have you been taking all your medications as prescribed? Mom looked uncomfortable. Well, mostly. Sometimes I forget the evening pills. Mom, I said, more sharply than I intended, you didn't tell me you were having trouble with your medications. I didn't want to worry you. You already do so much. Linda leaned forward. What about the morning pills? Are you forgetting those too? Sometimes. The routine got disrupted when I had that cold a few weeks ago, and I never quite got back on track. I stared at her, realizing how much I'd been missing despite all my careful attention to her appointments and paperwork. I'd been managing her care from the outside, but I hadn't been paying attention to what was actually happening day to day. Dr. Martinez pulled out a small notebook. We need to set up a system to make sure you're taking everything consistently. Do you have one of those weekly pill organizers? I bought her one, I said, but I never followed up to make sure she was using it. I tried to use it for a while, Mom said quietly, but it felt so depressing, sorting pills every week like I was really sick. Linda and I exchanged a look. For the first time since she'd arrived, we were on the same side of something. What if I called every morning to remind you? Linda asked. Would that help without feeling too clinical? Mom's face brightened slightly. That might be nice, actually. I miss talking to you regularly anyway. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. Family involvement makes a huge difference in medication compliance. Catherine, since you handle most of the appointment coordination, maybe you could check in on the evening medications when you stop by? Of course. I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief that there was a concrete way to help, and guilt that I'd let things slide this far. Now, about the kidney function, Dr. Martinez continued. I want to see you again in 2 weeks, and we may need to adjust some dosages. But I'm optimistic that with better medication management and some dietary changes, we can keep this stable. After Dr. Martinez left, the three of us sat in the living room processing what had just happened. The argument about financial arrangements and property deeds suddenly seemed much less important. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about forgetting the pills, Mom said finally. I know you count on me to be responsible about that stuff. No, Mom, I'm sorry I wasn't paying better attention. I rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of my oversight. I've been so focused on managing your schedule and your finances that I forgot to check on the basics. Linda was quiet for a long moment. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said eventually. What do you mean? I mean, I was worried that living so far away meant I'd miss important things about Mom's health. But it turns out you can miss important things even when you're right here. Her words stung because they were true. You're right. I thought I had everything under control, but I was looking at the wrong things. Maybe we both were, Linda said. I was so focused on feeling left out of the big decisions that I wasn't asking the right questions about Mom's daily life either. Mom looked between us. Maybe that's part of the problem. You've both been trying so hard to take care of me that we forgot I need to be part of the conversation too. I thought about that. What do you mean? I mean, I was embarrassed about forgetting pills, so I didn't mention it. I was overwhelmed by all the legal and financial stuff, so I just let Catherine handle it. I was afraid of being a burden to Linda, so I didn't ask for help. Everyone was trying to protect everyone else, but we weren't actually talking to each other. Linda nodded slowly. So, what do we do differently? Before Mom could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down and felt my blood pressure spike immediately. The message was from Tom, Linda's husband. Linda, are you planning to stay there long? The kids are asking when you're coming home, and I found some legal papers on your desk about power of attorney transfers. Call me. I looked up to find Linda watching my face. What is it? The fragile truce we'd built over the past hour suddenly felt very precarious again. I decided not to share the text message. Not yet. The moment felt too fragile, and Linda and I had just started to find our footing with each other again. Just work stuff, I said, sliding my phone face down on the coffee table. Nothing urgent. But the lie sat heavy in my chest. Tom's message meant Linda had been planning something with power of attorney documents before she even arrived. All her concerns about being left out, all her accusations about me controlling everything, maybe they hadn't been spontaneous reactions to our arguments. Maybe she'd come here with the agenda. The thought made me feel sick. Had our entire conversation just been Linda gathering ammunition for some legal challenge? Was I being paranoid, or was I finally seeing clearly? Catherine? Mom's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, just tired. I forced myself to focus on the present moment. You were saying something about us all needing to communicate better? But even as I tried to engage, part of my mind was racing. Linda had been taking notes during Dr. Martinez's visit. She'd asked specific questions about Mom's medication management and my oversight of her care. At the time, I'd thought she was just being thorough. Now I wondered if she was building a case. I think we need some kind of system, Mom continued. Maybe a family meeting once a week where we all check in about how things are going. Not just medical stuff, but everything. That sounds reasonable, Linda said. I could call in when I'm not here. I nodded, but I was studying Linda's face, looking for signs of deception. Was she genuinely interested in better communication, or was she fishing for more evidence of my inadequacy as a caregiver? The paranoia was eating at me, but I couldn't shake it. Linda lived 3 hours away. She visited maybe once every 2 months. Yet somehow she'd developed strong opinions about Mom's care and my role in it. Strong enough to consult lawyers about power of attorney transfers. Actually, I said carefully, I've been wondering about something, Linda. When you called Dr. Martinez's office, what exactly did you tell them? The question hung in the air. Linda's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. I told them I was concerned about Mom's care, which I was. But what specifically did you say about me? Mom looked between us, sensing the tension returning. Girls, please. We were doing so well. I told them that I felt like there might be some gaps in Mom's care that the family wasn't seeing, Linda said. I wanted to make sure they were getting the full picture. The full picture according to you, based on visits every few months? Catherine, don't. Mom's voice carried a warning. But I couldn't stop myself. The text message from Tom, the power of attorney papers, Linda's carefully worded concerns to the doctor. It all felt calculated now. I'm here every day, Linda. Every single day. I manage Mom's pills, her appointments, her groceries, her bills. I drive her to the bank, to the pharmacy, to lunch with her friends. When she had that dizzy spell last month, I'm the one who sat with her in the emergency room for 6 hours. When she couldn't figure out her new Medicare supplement, I spent 3 days on the phone with insurance companies. When she needed someone to talk to after Dad's anniversary, I'm the one who came over at 10 at night and sat with her. My voice was rising, but I couldn't control it. So, forgive me if I'm a little confused about why someone who shows up occasionally thinks she knows better than me what Mom needs. Because maybe being here every day means you're too close to see some things clearly, Linda shot back. Like the medication situation we just discovered. That stopped me cold. She was right, and we both knew it. Look, Linda continued, I'm not trying to attack you. But when I call Mom and she sounds confused, or when I visit and notice she's lost weight, or when I see that her house isn't as organized as it used to be, I worry. And maybe I worry more because I'm not here to help fix those things. I felt tears threatening. So, you called her doctor and made it sound like I'm neglecting her. I never used that word. You didn't have to. The implication was clear enough. Mom stood up abruptly. Stop it. Both of you, just stop. We both turned to look at her. She looked older suddenly, more fragile. I can't listen to this anymore. You're both trying so hard to prove you care about me that you're tearing each other apart. And you're making decisions about my life like I'm not sitting right here. She walked to the window and stood there for a moment, looking out at her garden. Linda, Catherine has been wonderful to me. More than wonderful. I don't know what I would have done without her these past few years. But Catherine. Linda loves me too, and just because she lives farther away doesn't mean her concerns aren't valid. Neither of us said anything. I'm 82 years old, Mom continued. I'm not going to live forever, and we all know it. What I don't understand is why that makes you both so angry at each other instead of grateful for the time we have left. The silence stretched out, heavy with guilt and grief and frustration. Finally, Linda spoke. I brought some paperwork with me, legal stuff, about making sure Mom's wishes are documented properly. My heart sank. Here it came. What kind of paperwork? I asked. Linda looked at Mom, then back at me. Power of attorney documents, updated ones. Tom helped me research what we need to make sure everything is covered. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. All of Linda's talk about communication and working together, and she'd been planning to circumvent me legally all along. I see, I said quietly. It's not what you think, Linda said quickly. Really? Because it sounds like you decided I'm incompetent to handle Mom's affairs and you're planning to take over. That's not it at all. The documents I brought would make us co-powers of attorney. Both of us. So neither of us is carrying all that responsibility alone. I stared at her. Co-powers of attorney? Yes. So we can both help Mom with different things, depending on what she needs and what we're each good at. And so if something happens to one of us, the other one can still help her. That wasn't what I'd expected. At all. Mom turned from the window, and I could see something like relief in her expression. I think that sounds very sensible, she said softly. I felt disoriented, like I'd been braced for a fight that suddenly evaporated. The living room felt different now, the late afternoon light slanting through the windows in a way that made everything look softer, less combative. The family photos on Mom's mantelpiece seemed to be watching us with quiet patience. I don't understand, I said, sinking back into my chair. The fabric was worn smooth from years of use, and I remembered how Dad used to sit in this exact spot reading his evening paper. All this time, I thought you were trying to prove I couldn't handle things? Linda sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap. Her shoulders had dropped, and she looked tired in a way that reminded me she'd driven 6 hours to get here. I was scared, she admitted. Every time we talked on the phone, it seemed like there was something new wrong. Mom's blood pressure, or a fall, or confusion about her medications. And I felt so helpless being so far away. But you made it sound like I wasn't taking care of things properly. No, that's not... Linda paused, running her hand through her hair. Okay, maybe I did. But not because I thought you were careless. Because I was panicking, and I needed someone to blame for the fact that Mom is getting older, and I can't do anything about it from 3 states away. Mom settled back into her recliner, the one she'd bought after Dad died, because she said she deserved something comfortable just for herself. I knew you two were struggling with this, she said. Catherine, you've been carrying so much responsibility, and Linda, you've been feeling left out of important decisions. But neither of you asked me what I wanted. The weight of that hit me unexpectedly. I'd been so focused on managing Mom's care, on being the good daughter who lived nearby and handled everything, that I'd stopped thinking of her as the person making the choices. What do you want, Mom? I asked. She smiled, and for a moment she looked less fragile, more like the woman who'd raised us. I want both my daughters involved in my life. I want Catherine to keep helping me with the day-to-day things, because she's good at it and she's here. But I also want Linda to be part of the bigger decisions, because she asks different questions than Catherine does, and sometimes I need that perspective. Linda leaned forward. The legal documents I brought aren't about taking anything away from you, Catherine. They're about making sure we can both help Mom in official ways. Right now, if something happened and you couldn't be reached, I'd have no legal standing to help her at all. I thought about the stack of medical forms I'd filled out over the years, the way I'd gradually become the person doctors called first, the one who knew Mom's insurance information and medication list by heart. It had felt important, being needed like that, but it had also felt heavy. I've been afraid, I said quietly, that if I shared any of the responsibility, it would mean I was admitting I couldn't handle it, and then maybe you'd decide Mom needed to move closer to you or go into some kind of facility. Is that what you've been worried about this whole time? Linda asked, her voice gentle. I nodded, feeling foolish. The fear had seemed so rational in my head, but saying it out loud made it sound small and selfish. Catherine, Mom said, I don't want to leave my house. I've told you that, and Linda knows it too. This isn't about anyone taking over my life. It's about making sure I have support from both of you. The room felt peaceful now, filled with the kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes. I could hear Mom's old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same sound that had marked time throughout my childhood. So, the co-power of attorney thing, I said to Linda, that means we both have equal say? Equal authority, yes, but we'd need to communicate with each other about major decisions. No more of you handling everything alone, and no more of me feeling shut out. It sounded reasonable, more than reasonable. But something was nagging at me, a detail that didn't quite fit with this new, collaborative picture Linda was painting. Wait, I said, remembering something that had been bothering me since this whole crisis started. If this is all about working together and sharing responsibility, why did you call Dr. Peterson and make it sound like there was an emergency? Why didn't you just call me first and ask about Mom's medication management? Linda's expression shifted, and I saw a flicker of the guilt I'd been expecting all along. She started, then stopped. I did call Dr. Peterson. But Catherine, I didn't just express concerns. I asked him specifically about whether Mom should still be living alone. The peaceful feeling in the room evaporated instantly. Mom sat up straighter in her chair, and I felt my chest tighten. "What exactly did you say to him?" I asked, though I was no longer sure I wanted to know the answer. Linda looked down at her hands, and the silence stretched uncomfortably long. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before. I told him that I was concerned about Mom's safety living alone, and that I thought maybe it was time to explore other living arrangements. I said that you might not be able to see the situation clearly because you're so close to it. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt Mom tense beside me, and when I looked at her, I could see the hurt and betrayal written across her face. "You told him I couldn't see clearly?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Linda, that's not expressing concern. That's undermining everything I've been trying to do for Mom." "That's not what I meant to do," Linda said quickly. "I was worried, Catherine. When I saw those pill organizers that day, with some compartments empty and others still full, it scared me. And then Mom seemed confused about her appointment times." "I had a head cold that day," Mom interjected, her voice sharp with indignation. "My thinking was foggy, yes, but that doesn't mean I'm incompetent to live in my own home." I could feel my anger building, all the collaborative spirit from moments before dissolving. "So instead of calling me to ask about the medications or talking to Mom directly about your concerns, you decided to go behind both our backs to her doctor?" "I didn't go behind anyone's back," Linda protested. "Dr. Peterson is Mom's doctor. I have every right to discuss my concerns with him." "But you presented it like there was some kind of crisis," I said. "You made it sound like I was being negligent or controlling. Do you have any idea how that made me look? How it made me feel when he started questioning everything I'd been doing?" Mom stood up from her chair, her movements sharp with irritation. "Both of you stop talking about me like I'm not sitting right here. Linda, I'm disappointed in you. If you had concerns about my care, you should have spoken to me first. I'm still capable of having a conversation about my own health." Linda's face flushed red. "Mom, I know you're capable, but you have to understand, from the outside looking in, it seemed like Catherine was maybe taking on too much, and maybe some things were falling through the cracks." "What things?" I demanded. "Name one thing that fell through the cracks." "The medication timing, for one thing. And you've been so stressed lately, Catherine. Every time I call, you sound overwhelmed." I started wondering if maybe Mom needed more professional support. I felt like I was back in childhood, being judged and found wanting by my older sister. The familiar sting of inadequacy mixed with my anger, creating a toxic combination that made my chest feel tight. "I've been stressed because it's a big responsibility," I said. "But that doesn't mean I'm failing at it, and it certainly doesn't mean Mom needs to be moved out of her home." "I never said she needed to be moved," Linda said, but her tone wasn't entirely convincing. Mom walked over to the window, her back to both of us. When she spoke, her voice was controlled but cold. "Linda, when you called Dr. Peterson, did you ask him about assisted living facilities?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Linda's silence was answer enough. "You did," I said, not really asking. "This whole thing about sharing responsibility and working together, that was never really what you wanted, was it?" Linda's composure finally cracked. "I want what's best for Mom, and sometimes what's best isn't what's most comfortable or familiar." Mom turned around, and I could see tears in her eyes. "What's best for me," she said slowly, "is living in the house where I raised my daughters, sleeping in the bed I shared with your father for 37 years, and having my morning coffee in the kitchen where I've cooked thousands of meals for this family. What's best for me is having my independence for as long as I'm capable of managing it safely. But Mom, Linda started. I'm not finished, Mom said, her voice carrying the authority it had held when we were children. What's not best for me is having my daughters make decisions about my life without including me in the conversation. What's not best is having one daughter call my doctor to discuss moving me into a facility without ever asking me how I feel about it. I looked at Linda, seeing her clearly for the first time in this whole mess. The sister who had always been the responsible one, the one with the organized life and the clear plans, was trying to organize our mother's life the same way. Linda, I said quietly, do you really think Mom isn't safe at home? Or are you just more comfortable with the idea of her being in a place where professionals are managing her care? Linda's eyes filled with tears. I don't know anymore. I look at her living alone, and I imagine all the things that could go wrong, and it terrifies me. At least in assisted living, someone would check on her every day. Someone does check on her every day, I said. Me. But what if something happens to you? Linda asked, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't really about Mom's capability or my competence. This was about Linda's fear of losing control, of something terrible happening while she was hundreds of miles away. So this is about you feeling helpless, I said, not unkindly. Linda nodded, wiping her eyes. I lie awake at night sometimes, thinking about what would happen if Mom fell, or had a stroke, or got confused and wandered outside. And I'm not here to help. The room felt heavy with the weight of unspoken fears and misunderstandings. I could see now how we'd all been talking past each other, each of us carrying our own anxieties and assumptions. But I also knew that Linda's phone call to Dr. Peterson had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The trust between us had been damaged, and I wasn't sure how to repair it. So what now? I asked. Where do we go from here? Before anyone could answer, Mom's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It's Dr. Peterson, she said, looking between Linda and me. He's calling on a Saturday evening. That's never a good sign. Mom answered the phone with steady hands, though I could see the tension in her shoulders. Hello, Dr. Peterson. Linda and I watched as Mom's expression shifted from concern to confusion to something that looked almost like relief. I see, Mom said. Yes, she's here with me now. Would you like to speak with her? Mom held out the phone to Linda, who took it with obvious reluctance. Hello, Dr. Peterson, Linda said, her voice small. I couldn't hear his side of the conversation, but I watched Linda's face cycle through embarrassment, defensiveness, and finally, resignation. Yes, I understand, Linda said finally. I apologize for overstepping. It won't happen again. She handed the phone back to Mom, who spoke briefly with the doctor before hanging up. He wanted me to know that he'd received a concerning call, Mom said carefully. And he wanted to make sure I was aware of it before Monday's appointment. He also wanted to clarify that any future discussions about my care need to include me directly. The silence that followed felt different from the earlier tension. This wasn't the charged quiet of an argument building, but the heavy stillness that comes after a line has been crossed and everyone knows it. I'm sorry, Linda said finally. I was scared, and I thought I was helping, but I handled it all wrong. You were scared, I repeated, trying to understand. But Linda, you made me look like I was endangering Mom. Do you know what that felt like? Linda's face crumpled. I never meant for it to sound like that. I just wanted the doctor to know that Mom was living alone, that she had some memory issues, that maybe we should be talking about alternatives. But you presented it as if I was hiding information from her medical team, I said, the hurt still fresh. As if I was preventing her from getting proper care. I know, Linda whispered. I know I messed up. Mom set her coffee cup down with a firm clink. You both messed up. Linda and I turned to her in surprise. Linda, you went behind my back and behind your sister's back instead of talking to us directly. That was wrong. Mom's voice was steady but stern. But you, she said, looking at me, you've been making decisions for me without asking what I want either. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already knew. You scheduled that physical therapy appointment without asking if I wanted to go. You've been telling people I'm doing fine when some days I don't feel fine at all. You've been so busy proving to Linda that I can manage at home that you haven't asked me if home is where I want to be. The words hit me like a physical blow. But you said you wanted to stay home? You just told Linda that independence is what's best for you. It is, Mom said. Right now, it is. But I also want to be able to talk about my fears and concerns without feeling like I'm letting you down or giving Linda ammunition to move me into a facility. I sank back into my chair, seeing the situation from an entirely new angle. You feel like you can't be honest with either of us about how you're really doing? Sometimes, Mom admitted. Linda thinks every small confusion or moment of fatigue means I need full-time care. You think any admission that things are getting harder means Linda was right. Neither of you seems to trust me to know my own mind. Linda was crying openly now. I'm so sorry, Mom. I was so afraid of something happening to you while I was far away that I wasn't listening to what you actually needed. And I was so focused on proving you wrong that I wasn't listening either, I said, the realization settling heavy in my chest. I've been treating you like a problem to solve instead of asking what you actually want. Mom reached over and took both our hands. I want to stay in my home for as long as I safely can. I want to be honest about when things are getting difficult without that honesty being used against me. And I want my daughters to work together instead of against each other. How do we do that? Linda asked. How do we support you without micromanaging your life? Mom smiled, and for the first time all evening, it reached her eyes. You could start by including me in conversations about my own care. Both of you. What about the memory issues? I asked. The times when you do get confused? We acknowledge them honestly, Mom said. We plan for them. We don't pretend they don't exist, and we don't catastrophize them either. Linda wiped her eyes. I need to apologize to you too, she said to me. Going to Dr. Peterson the way I did, making it sound like you were hiding things or preventing proper care, that was completely wrong. I was frustrated that you weren't taking my concerns seriously. But that's no excuse for what I did. I wasn't taking your concerns seriously, I admitted. Every time you brought up assisted living or extra help, I felt like you were criticizing how I was caring for Mom. So I got defensive instead of listening. Maybe we could set up regular calls, Linda suggested hesitantly. All three of us together, so I can stay involved without feeling like I have to go around anyone to get information. That's a good start, Mom said. And maybe we could visit some assisted living facilities together. Not because I'm ready to move, but so we all know what options exist when the time comes. I felt my defensive instincts flare, but I pushed them down. You're right. I've been treating any discussion of future care like giving up, but that's not fair to either of you. There's something else, Mom said quietly. I need both of you to know that when the time comes, that I can't safely live alone, I'll tell you. I don't want to end up in a situation where I'm too proud or too confused to recognize that I need more help. How will we know you're being honest about that? Linda asked gently. How will we know you're not just telling us what you think we want to hear? Mom considered this. Maybe we could agree on some specific markers together. Things like if I start getting lost driving familiar routes, or if I forget to take my medication multiple days in a row, or if I have a fall that I can't get up from alone. Concrete things, I said, understanding. Not just when you seem confused, or when we think you need more help. Exactly. Things we can all recognize and agree on. Linda nodded slowly. And in the meantime, we trust your judgment and support your independence. While being honest about concerns instead of going behind each other's backs, I added, looking pointedly at Linda. And while being open to concerns instead of dismissing them automatically, Linda replied, looking pointedly back at me. Mom laughed, and the sound broke some of the remaining tension in the room. My daughters, still bickering like children. Some things never change, I said, but I was smiling too. Some things need to change, though, Linda said seriously. I can't keep living in constant fear that something terrible is going to happen while I'm not here. And I can't keep trying to control things from 3 states away. What does that mean? Mom asked. Linda took a deep breath. It means I need to trust both of you more. Trust that you'll be honest about how you're doing, Mom, and trust that you'll take good care of her and keep me informed, she said to me. And I need to stop taking every suggestion as a criticism, I said. We're both trying to do what's best for Mom, just from different perspectives. Different perspectives can be valuable, Mom said. If you two can learn to work together instead of against each other. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the weight of the evening's revelations settling around us. The problem wasn't solved entirely, I realized. Linda would still worry from 3 states away. I would still feel the daily weight of responsibility. And Mom would still face the gradual challenges of aging. But something fundamental had shifted in how we were approaching it together. I should call Dr. Peterson back on Monday, Linda said finally. Apologize properly and make sure he knows that any future conversations about Mom's care should include all of us. That would be good, Mom agreed. And I think I should be more honest with him about the challenges I am facing, instead of downplaying everything. We all need to be more honest, I said, with him and with each other. As Linda prepared to head back to her hotel that evening, she hugged us both tightly. I love you both, she said, and I'm sorry I made such a mess of trying to help. We all made a mess, Mom said gently. But we're cleaning it up together. After Linda left, Mom and I sat together in her living room, both of us emotionally drained, but somehow lighter than we'd been in weeks. Are you really okay with staying here? I asked her quietly. Not what you think I want to hear, but honestly, are you okay? Mom considered the question seriously. Most days, yes. Some days are harder than others. There are times when I get frightened about the future, about what happens if I fall or get really sick. But right now, today, I'm okay being here. And you'll tell me when that changes? I'll tell you when that changes. I believed her, and that belief felt like the first genuine trust we'd shared in months. The next morning, Linda came by before her flight home. The 3 of us sat around Mom's kitchen table, making plans for regular video calls and discussing the specific markers we'd use to evaluate Mom's safety over time. I'm still going to worry, Linda admitted. I know, I said, but maybe you can worry with us instead of worrying about us. It wasn't a perfect solution, I knew. Family dynamics that had been decades in the making wouldn't change overnight. But it was a beginning, a foundation we could build on. After Linda's flight departed, I drove back to Mom's house to find her in her garden, tending to the roses she'd planted when she and Dad first bought the house. "How are you feeling about everything?" I asked, settling into the lawn chair beside her. "Relieved," she said simply. "For the first time in months, I feel like my daughters are talking with me instead of about me." That afternoon, as I helped Mom organize her medication into weekly containers, she said something that stayed with me. "You know, caring for someone doesn't mean making all their decisions for them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is trust them to know their own mind and support the choices they make." I thought about that as I drove home, and I thought about it over the following weeks as our new routine of honest communication slowly took hold. Linda called every Sunday evening for video chats that included all three of us. Mom started being more open about her difficult days as well as her good ones. I started asking Mom what she wanted instead of assuming I knew. The trust that had been damaged began to rebuild, slowly but steadily. Not the blind trust of assuming everything was fine, but the deeper trust of knowing we could handle problems together, honestly and with respect for each other's perspectives. 3 months later, when Mom did have a minor fall in her bathroom, she called me immediately. When I arrived to find her bruised but otherwise uninjured, the first thing she said was, "This isn't one of our markers, but I wanted you to know right away." We called Linda together from the emergency room, where Mom was getting checked out as a precaution. Instead of accusations or panic, our conversation focused on practical next steps. Grab bars for the bathroom, a medical alert system, and an honest discussion about whether this incident changed anything about Mom's ability to live safely at home. It didn't, but the fact that we could evaluate it together, calmly and honestly, felt like a victory. I learned something important through all of this. When someone tells others that you're preventing a family member from getting proper care, it's not always about the actual care being provided. Sometimes it's about fear, about feeling helpless or excluded, about different definitions of what proper care means. The real solution isn't just defending your actions or proving the accusations wrong. It's stepping back and asking whether everyone involved feels heard, included, and trusted to contribute to the person's well-being. Family caregiving works best when it truly is family caregiving, when everyone who cares about the person can contribute their perspective and concerns without fear of being dismissed or overruled. It requires more patience, more communication, and more willingness to admit when you're wrong. But the peace of mind that comes from working together instead of against each other is worth every difficult conversation.